Welcome back to V8 Creative and part 51 of the Ultima RS build, and on this episode we are putting this in there. Yes, welcome back to the Dean Den and another all-day pass. And you're going to watch over the next 20 to 30 minutes me install that 6.2 litre V8 engine in the Ultima RS chassis. But before we get to nuts and bolts, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor. Yes, Adrian Flux, an insurance company that's been in business for over 50 years and specialise in component cars. Now, what you'll find is that if you're putting one of these beasts on the road, or even if you're building one, having insurance obviously is really important. And during my 7 builds to date, the vast majority have been insured by Adrian Flux. So if you're interested in build insurance or driving insurance, I will put the website address in the description. Go on the site, request a call back from one of their very, very experienced staff, and I'll leave it in your capable hands. Anyway, let's get back to that V8. Welcome to one of the last times you're going to see me sitting in the engine bay, because soon there's going to be an awful lot of horsepower just nestled in here. Now, what I need to do is I've been thinking about, once that engine's in here, how difficult it will be for me to gain access to certain areas. So what I'm doing is I'm just thinking through everything I need to do before the block goes in. And I've got a small list here. So it's wiring in the low pressure fuel pump. That's pretty easy. It's just 2 connections. It's also putting back on the fuel system and making sure all those connections are tight. Well, I can easily get in there. Also, there's a little bit of wiring I need to just tidy up. It won't take long. And then there is a fuel pipe down here that does need attaching to the chassis, just one more. And I think that's about it, because everything else should be pretty easy to get to. To be honest, until the headers are on, access isn't too bad. But anyway, let's get down here and start tinkering. Now, welcome to my little corner here. Now, it's a little bit crowded, as you can see. So we've got electrics here, we have air conditioning hoses here, we have coolant hoses here, we have fuel hoses, we have the low pressure fuel pump here. Let me just move these aircon hoses out the way to give me some room. Now, the actual hose I'm talking about is this hose here. As you can see, the last thing I really want this to be doing is rubbing against the fuel tank, which is this here. So what I'm thinking is I need to sort of attach this to this chassis tube. Now, I could use just a zip tie, but what I thought is I might use these just 2 fasteners and just put a couple of P-clips in there, like this. Let's see, P-clip, if you can imagine. Whoops, I dropped it. See how little room there is? You imagine having the engine in here doing this. So if we get, say, that P-clip like that, and then if it sits in behind this, and do that there, and I think that'd be quite neat. Right, okay, let's get on with it. Let's remove the fuel pump. Okay, now that should just come away like that. Now let's see how easy this is. There you go, just do that loosely. Let me take this one off, unscrew that. Pop P-clip in, and screw that back in. Okay. And then put the fuel pump back on. You may have noticed I painted this bracket black. It usually comes in raw aluminium. I just thought, no, I'll make it black. Just one of those things I do when I'm cracking open a beer. There we go. It sits nicely there. And it doesn't bridge the gap to the fuel pump, so this is still rubber mounted, which you need it to be. Right, what's next? Right, now the ends for the fuel pump are actually eyelets, so let's get rid of those, and then I'll put some eyelets on that come in a little kit with 2 rubber boots, because this is under the car and it's going to get filthy. Right, always put the boots on before the ends. Okay, I should have threaded those through before I stripped them, but there you go, you live and learn. I think I might take a little bit more of that insulation off just to get that back. Okay, now one of these is positive and one of those is negative, and I don't know which is which. I'll have to get underneath, take a photograph, I think, with my phone. So now all the wiring's done, I'm just going to go around and just nip up all these fuel lines just to make sure they're tight. Right, we're getting there. You'll see this takes a little bit of time. Right, so let's do these up. I think that's it. Now I've got one thing left to do before the engine goes in that I forgot, and that is routing these Gearshift cables. I'm not sure where they go. I'm just going to have a look at the build portal because they go under the engine. It's probably easier to do them before I put the block in. Let's just tidy up. So here we have the 2 Gearshift cables, and these are zip tied to the handbrake cable. Just to keep them in place. And they're neatly routed. I'll worry about the back later. Now the other thing I can do is actually put some of the coolant hose in. Didn't realise that. So let's just climb out. So we're popping on this coolant pipe while it's easy to get in here. Like this. There you go. Now, are we ready for this? Yep, we're going to install the lump. Now, I'm doing a voiceover here because it was far too stressful to do it while I was doing a job. So first of all, we're taking the cradle away, which is a very easy job to do. And those chains you see there, they have got a 350 kilogram brake point. So well within tolerance for that engine that comes in at about 190 kilos with all the ancillaries bolted on. Now I'm using a Draper lift here. It's really, really good. It's at its maximum extension, which can take 500 kilos, again, well within limits. So what I need to do is really just jack this thing up, maneuver it around so it clears that back chassis. And as you can probably see, I've had to jack up that back chassis to really allow the engine lifter to go underneath the car. So I'm pretty much clear now. I keep checking again. And really fitting an engine is a very, very straightforward process. It just takes patience and it just takes a little bit of time. Most people, when they're fitting an engine, there's usually two of you doing the task. But for me, I was doing it on my own and I can just take my time. So now we're reaching more of a critical moment because now not only the engine is suspended, it is over the car as well. So any slip here could be a real mess. So you'll see me going backwards and forwards here, trying to stop the engine. Oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. I've speeded this up. It wasn't as bad as it looks. And now lining it up. And really basically what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get the engine far enough into the engine bay so the engine mounts roughly line up. Here I am now taking the pressure off the hydraulics and dropping that unit in, and boy, it just fits perfectly. Now I can sort of see this coming together, and this is a great shot here. I really like this. You can see I'm really close to that firewall and just coming down, and I must say this bit is very tight here, and especially the front auxiliary bout pulleys. They're very close to the fuel system. Arguably I could have removed them, but it's far easier to have them all fitted before the engine goes in. So down it goes, and here we're getting really close to it actually being on the engine mount itself. That side's near enough done. It's just this side. I'm pretty much there, I think. Yep, I'm just going to go down now, and yep, it's touched on the chassis now. Now you'll see on top of that rear wheel I've got a bolt, and I'm just going to see if it fits. Woohoo! Look at that, just straight in. Yeah, as you can tell from my voice, I'm very happy about that, because once you get one in, it really makes the job easier, because then you can just jiggle that engine around until you get the other side actually lined up, and you'll see me doing that next. Here I am, and you'll see now it's quite easy for me to move this engine around on those chains. You'll see, look, I can just move it about a centimetre or so and line everything up. On goes this side, and that's pretty much it. All I do now is take the tension off of the chains and then take the chains off, and it's done. And okay, I've speeded a few bits up, but that's pretty much real time. And now comes the great bit, because what I can do now is start plugging that engine into that car, into the loom, into the fueling system, into the cooling system. It's almost like the heart. You'll see me now taking off all the fixings that are holding those chains on. I was using blind threaded holes into the heads to lift it. Very useful actually on the LS3 that. Here we go. These all planted. That was a good feeling, that was. Anyway, I'll leave you to it now, and you'll see me taking the back of the car off of the jacks. And I think it's time for a beer.
Beer.
The Eagle has landed.
Protecting my peace for so long, a little too good, now I'm so low. Watching reruns of the same shows, almost every party I'm a no-show. Even with green lights I don't go, never been sure, no I don't know. How does everybody has to let go of the egos? Don't go out nearly as much as I should, barely know the way around my neighborhood. I'm ruminating, I feel no good, not living life like I know I could, like I know I could, like I know I should, like I know I could, like I know I could, like I could.
Just look at it, look. Last night, after I put those rocker covers on, I just sat here with a beer and just admired the installation, as though the RS was always built to take this V8. And in fact, it was. In the early days, they used Rover V8s and then went to Chevrolet. Boy, doesn't it look good. And if you see how low it sits in the chassis, it's one of the secrets to the astonishing performance of these cars, because the center of gravity is just so low. And also, just look at the rubber, look at the weight distribution. When you put your foot on that loud pedal, it just digs in and accelerates. You don't need traction control with this beast, it just launches. Well, anyway, enough about that. The next job is to actually attach what's known as basically the bell house conversion plate onto the rear of the engine. So what this is really doing is taking that LS3 American Grunt and grafting it to Porsche transaxle. So what we're going to do now is go over to the bench and I'm going to show you the kit Ultima provide, which is a beautiful piece of machining and also a large number of bolts you have to get in exactly the right position, or you could do some serious damage to this lump. Anyway, let's get spannering. So here we have it, a huge piece of billet aluminium that has been machined meticulously to mate that LS3 to the Porsche transaxle. Now, what you can see here, this is actually the engine side here, and these two location points go on two pins on the back of the engine, and then the flywheel basically sits in here and the clutch assembly, and then down in this corner here, this is where the dog of the starter motor comes in and basically turns the engine to start it. Now, if you see, there's multiple bolt holes here, and this assembly actually varies in thickness in different areas. And what Ultima do is they provide, as you can see here, a vast array of bolts, and all these are labelled. For example, we have an M12 x 45 here, and then here we'd have an M10 x 40, and then an M12 x 40. Now, if you look here, the only difference between these two bolts is 5mm, but it's really, really important you put these in the correct holes, because if I try putting a 45mm length bolt into a blind hole that's only 40mm deep, you're going to crack the casting. So what I'm going to do now is a trick my dad taught me of how to ensure all these bolts go into exactly the right holes. But geez, I just love it. Just look at this. And of course, all these bolts Half are for mounting this to the engine and the other half are for mounting this to the gearbox basically. And they're all have stud lock on them and they're all tightened to a specific torque. Now this is a tip my father taught me when we built engines together, and what it was when you were taking an assembly apart, to ensure you were going to put everything back in the same location as it removed, especially fasteners, and it could be big ends, etc. What you would do is actually get a big old cardboard box, draw around the components, and then basically put the bolts through the cardboard box where exactly they should go. And what this means is there's no confusion. It doesn't matter if it's months after you've taken something apart and need to put it back together again, you know exactly where everything goes. Now, I've positioned this on the orientation that basically this is like looking at the rear of the engine. So what I'll do is I'll do this and I'll stand the box next to the car and I can tell exactly where everything goes. So the first thing we do is we draw around the component. Next, you get a screwdriver and basically pop through all the holes. I'll do these as well. These are more difficult because box is flexing, but these are the gearbox. There you go. So now what we do is we take this off and put that to one side. And now we can see basically all the holes where the bolts are going to go. Now, what the Ultima portal does is it provides you with exactly the size of which bolt goes in which hole, and that's what we're going to get now. Okay, we're going to start with the M10 x 50s, which goes there, there, Right, so there you have it. And you probably saw I made a couple of mistakes over here, so that's why it's just so important to check and recheck. Now, I believe they're all in the right position now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this box by the side of the car so I know exactly where each of these fasteners go. So let's get over to the RS. Torque wrenches. Great piece of kit and essential if you're building a component car. And this is a case in point where we are connecting the adapter plate to the LS3 and all those M10 bolts required to be torqued down to 58 Newton meter. Now, of course, I've set it to 58 Newton meter here, but there's something my dad taught me, and it's just an old school thing. When you set this up, don't assume it is correct. Now, what I mean by that is always, before you start using it, pop it in a vise and then just feel how much force is required to tighten that bolt. And I've built enough engines to know that's about right. Now, the thing is, if this is set incorrectly or it's been damaged, what may happen when you actually come to start using it, if you don't check it, that first bolt you put in, you'll just pull the thread out of the engine, which is not a good thing to do. So we know this is working fine now. It's set to the right torque. So let's start bolting. So the first thing we do is we're just very gentle not to hit the chassis and pop this on. It goes over snugly with the flywheel. And then there are two little lugs. There you go. So the adapter plate is on. First thing I'm going to do is start putting in the bolts, starting at the top and going clockwise. Now they all need a bit of Loctite, stud lock. So I'm going to pop that on. and then spin that in. I think that's all of them. So these two down here for the starter motor. Okay, now get the torque wrench. Just do every other one for now. Just pull it down evenly. There we go. All torqued up. Let me just get my red pen now, just to mark them that they're torqued up. That's it. All done. Looking good. All right, now I think the next thing I'm going to fit is the starter motor. More unwrapping. Starter motor. So, peek the penknife again. Nice bit of kit that, but it needs to be hefty to turn over 6.2 litres of V8. Now this bolts via those two threaded holes onto the adapter plate. So let's just go over to the car and get that done. So this goes down in there. God. Just like that. Okay. Just get a bolt. Whoops. Ha. God. Okay. Mark with a red pen. It's torqued. All done. And there we have it. Another episode draws to a close, and what an episode. What spannering we've had. V8 installed, adapter plate installed, starter motor. It's all easy peasy stuff, to be honest. It really is. Ultima provides all the nuts and bolts, all the instructions. This engine just slots in. So what's the next stage? Well, the next stage is putting that transaxle on, and that's going to be the next episode. So we can get that 6-speed manual box bolted to the engine and then adjust all that cable shift system so we can go up through the cogs and I can make some brum brum noises. And then after that, we've got drive shafts, then we have induction system, and then exhausts, and then it's almost done. We are getting close to the end. But anyway, just a big shout out. Thank you for everyone subscribing. Thank you for all those comments. I go back to everyone, so keep them coming and supporting the channel. So from Rufus and I, all I can say is happy spannering.
Live your life within the moment, and don't go wait until the morning. You never know when it is over. All that I know is we'll get older. So let us dance this night away. To the groove and the light that flickers. We get lost in the crowd, it's getting thicker. We get away from the drinks and chatter. Haven't said a word, but it doesn't matter.